We're ready and rock and rolling. It's FAQ NYC. I'm Christy Greer here with Katie Honan and Harry Siegel and a special guest star, Ric Burns. And before we get started, I want to introduce the president of the Tenement Museum, Annie Polland. And thank you so much for letting us have this live episode of FAQ.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here. Do you want to know a little bit about the room you're in?
I think we should.
Okay. So we are in the saloon that was run by John and Caroline Schneider from the mid-1860s to the mid-1880s. It's the longest running business that was in this tenement. All tenements were built with space at the bottom for stores. And when this building was built in 1863, the population living here was largely German-speaking, known as Kleindeutschland, kind of the first neighborhood associated with a foreign language in New York, which is hard to believe because it's such a characteristic part of New York. But Kleindeutschland was viewed as kind of, if you were from uptown and you walked into this neighborhood, you'd feel like you were going to like some exotic space. But what was fascinating about the saloon is that this was a place where people might be speaking German, they might be reading German newspapers like this reproduction of the Stadtzeitung. But when you looked at these newspapers, they were really talking about politics here, not in Europe. They were talking about elections here. They were talking about businesses here. They were talking about the intersections between business and politics. And we know that John Schneider, in the 1870s, 1873, formed, I think it was the 8th chapter of the assembly, the 8th assembly chapter, 3rd chapter of the German American Reform Club. And this is a party of Germans who were upset by, this is like a new phenomenon, but corruption in government. They were upset by specifically mayoral corruption. And I know, luckily it was a thing of the 19th century.
We don't have that anymore.
Yeah, we don't have it anymore. And so they gathered here literally in that back room that you can see behind you to talk about this. And you know, one of the things, though, that's still really important to note about the German immigrant community, any immigrant community, basically any group, is we tend to use these, words like the Germans think this, the Jews think this, the Italians think this, when really it was extremely diverse. And so the Stadtzeitung, which the Schneiders read and advertised in, was more of like a middle class, almost like conservative politics. But there could be a German socialist newspaper next door and a German socialist club next door. And so the kinds of debates that might happen in this place would be huge debates. So again, just like New Yorkers today might be debating what to do, who to vote for, people in these tenements did as well.
Great. Well, that brings us to some debates that we've had in New York City. Should we just jump right in with you, Katie Honan? You had quite the night. And I should say, thank you, Tenement Museum, for hosting us. I'm a proud trustee of the museum. I'm very, very happy and proud and excited to be here. So, Katie, let's talk about last night. So, second debate.
Yeah.
Oh, and we have a bit of a live studio audience here. I don't know, for those of you at home. So, second debate, Mamdani, Sliwa, and Cuomo on stage. Sliwa and Cuomo still can't seem to pronounce Mamdani's name after all this time. You were one of the co-moderators, super proud. What were some of the takeaways that you saw, since you're in the room and you're seeing a different vantage point? I was with my students watching a little watch party at Fordham University, but what are some takeaways for you that we may have missed?
So yeah, we're a few days away from early voting on Saturday, 10 days away till election day, and we're really getting down the home stretch. So this was the final debate. I think Mamdani's performance, I think he was caught flat-footed a little bit on his inability to answer how he's going to vote on the ballot questions. Mm-hmm. That's something that's been reported a lot, but on stage it was a way for Cuomo and Sliwa to attack him. I do think Sliwa was, Curtis Sliwa is a decades-long radio show host, and he knows how to be a showman, and he exactly was a showman. A lot of, we had a live studio audience, which you could hear the cheers and the responses and some boos as well. I do think Andrew Cuomo's attacks were, some would say desperate at times, untruthful on certain times. And look, as a moderator, we've gotten lots of messages, what we should or shouldn't have done. You can't go after people constantly. You have to rein it in a little bit. But I think also voters should know how people interact with each other, and especially if someone's going to be a mayor. But that was really my takeaway with the three of them. I did find it interesting that Cuomo rushed very quickly. He must have sped through the Midtown Tunnel to get to the Knicks game to sit with Eric Adams, a sort of teaser. of his endorsement that happened today from Eric Adams, it's a reminder that politics is very strange, because September 5th, Eric Adams stood in front of me and other reporters and said Andrew Cuomo is a snake and a liar, and he cuts down black politicians and he's horrible. And now he said, we're brothers, and brothers sometimes fight. What are we going to do? So that we had a preview of all of that last night. Whether or not it moves the needle and we see what happens even with this Adams endorsement, I don't know how much it could help Andrew Cuomo. Or it could, what Zohran Mamdani has said is these two people are two peas in a pod. I mean, he didn't say that exactly, but that's what he is saying. And if you're happy with Eric Adams the last 4 years, then vote for Andrew Cuomo. But if you want to change, vote for me.
Right. I guess it's like two crooks and a rook. I don't know what the equivalent is. So before we bring in Ric Burns, Harry, so what are some takeaways for you? I know you have strong thoughts about, the Adams administration, seeing Cuomo buddy at the Knicks game. Go Knicks. Where do you think this goes? I mean, I don't think that a Eric Adams endorsement helps Cuomo. I don't think it helps him with black people. I'm sort of curious as to, it's signaling yesteryear to me, but then again, I may not be the average New Yorker. What do you think about the last 24 hours?
They've been funny. It's much too little, too late all around. Look, Eric Adams has already dropped out of the Democratic primary, then dropped out of the mayor's race, but his name's still going to be on the ballot. Andrew Cuomo, guys, I've not seen one poster or T-shirt or anything for Cuomo. Some of the Sliwa stuff is people putting stuff up on road medians and things like that as you get farther out in Brooklyn and Queens and parts of the Bronx. But there's people who are voting for him are gritting their teeth. Yeah. And the people who are with Eric Adams because of left punching and despair with that, none of this is moving anything. The Cuomo campaign briefly put out and then said it was a draft, a AI ad that was
racist,
wildly fear-mongering and absurd. I actually thought Mamdani had a pretty bad debate. He was sweaty, visibly. You could see the car salesman part of his smile as it was glued to his face, and he wasn't able to answer again. And this actually isn't the first time that these other candidates have been so bad. Some very simple questions that were not trick questions or anything of the sort. But he's winning. He didn't do anything terrible. There was nothing that changed the momentum of these things. Andrew Cuomo's sitting next to Eric Adams, and they're saying it's this guy. It's me or the abyss. And that's been his appeal the entire time. And what's your vision for the city? I don't know. I literally don't know. And I've had him on the phone privately, monologuing to me. I've watched his campaign closely and the appeals. I'm like, what do you want this job? What do you want to do? And it's I'm not that guy. That's the whole thing. It is incredible to me, and I'll be quiet, that how much of this election has been about candidates insisting other candidates drop out and things aren't fair. And the truth is, our elections are really weird and imbalanced a whole number of ways. And ranked choice primaries are complicated. Matching funds are really complicated. So there was all this outside money on Cuomo's behalf, but there were all these 8-to-1 matching funds candidates who are kamikaze and Cuomo. Nothing quite adds up. And then once Mamdani wins the primary and he's winning, he's in a very different position than in almost any other sort of race. If this wasn't a three-way race, I think it could actually be close and interesting. But all this just seems pathetic, desperate, and extremely late. I have a ton of concerns about Mamdani, but I voted for Cynthia Nixon.
Oh Lord!
And not happily, because the Cuomo campaign, when he was crushing her in a Democratic primary for governor, back when he was a big dog, and the guy. And he had this bizarre smear about how she was an anti-Semite, she's married to a Jewish woman, they're raising their kids Jewish. And I'm like, what are you doing? You've already won this race. It was vicious. And that was how he was presenting himself as the protector of the Jews. And you could see it in this bizarre AI ad that the campaign now says, again, as they did with the Nixon thing, well, that wasn't exactly us. That was a draft version of a thing. It's disgusting. And the whole appeal is fear and negativity. And so Mamdani's way to the left, but Chrissy's telling me to land this plane.
Please.
Way to the left of where we get in a natural two-person race. But Adams was a little to the right. That's how these things play out. And then you win and you claim a mandate and the people have spoken and see what you can do. And anyone who's here, lots of people are take a chance on the kid. And anyone who's here, if he's going to win, should be wishing him well.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. I mean, We see them courtside at the Knicks game last night, Adams and Cuomo. Thank God the Knicks won, because if not, it seemed like two losers hanging out. And I say that sincerely, not just like to be cruel, but like had the Knicks lost last night, I think the city would have turned on both of them. Like, you've cursed us on the first night. But Rick, you've followed a lot of New York. I mean, your series is, I think, a gift not just to New Yorkers, but to Americans and anyone who loves cities and appreciates cities. You've seen the evolution, and I think the beauty of New York is that cities regenerate themselves, right? I mean, the people who voted for, David Dinkins, the vast percentage of them aren't even here in New York anymore. The same could be said for even people who voted for de Blasio. So, at least for me, watching Cuomo on the stage, it's like a man who's returned to New York City and he's missed several iterations of the regeneration of the city. So he doesn't even know what he missed, because it's like, you think that you were gone and like it's changed once. It's like, it's actually changed so many times. This is how we could have this 33-year-old kid on the stage.
He's 34 now.
34, sorry, I missed the birthday. I saw the birthday ad. But this 34-year-old, assemblyman on stage, and people are really into it, and there's, this inspiration. And Cuomo is sort of like, I was, America's governor dad when everything was, when the president's telling us to inject bleach and like horse manure. He's like, I was the one with the PowerPoints. I was the one who was the serious one. What happened? I'm back in New York City, renting, by the way, after, living here his whole life, allegedly. So what do you say when you look at sort of a 21st century mayor's race, and you've looked at, basically the mayors who were in charge when the saloon was up and running?
I think that the question that gets brought up about Mamdani is his experience, which is sort of so kind of almost irritatingly repetitive about how everybody kind of forecasts what the next election or the next campaign and the next winner should be based on their sense of the past. Whereas that's never been the way it's really worked. And if you went like, well, you really need to have experience and not sort of callow youth, well, then I would say vote for Eric Adams. But that didn't work out so well. And so my thought is I've heard so many people, as we all have, talking about how, well, he's so young, he's 33, he's 34. But, there have been 31-year-old mayors, there's been 34-year-old mayors in the past, and they were not the bad mayors. They didn't completely screw up. And so my feeling is irrespective, and no, I don't really feel that he's like a far leftist. I feel he is a New Yorker from the Upper West Side who would automatically brands you as a certain kind of liberal, probably, as I am. We come from the same neighborhood, much older than Zoran. But, I think that he's somebody whose heart, and you can feel this, is genuinely into the idea of making a difference, making a change. And no matter what, whether he had a bad night last night or it wasn't so good last week either, he didn't screw up entirely. And he's clearly open to change. I know that's a cliche to say about him. So I find it really kind of interesting, let's go with perhaps somebody who's new, perhaps somebody who doesn't have experience, because experience doesn't always get you where you want to go in city politics. And, I think that my guess about him is that he'll move around and he'll experiment, and if he fails, it'll be because he simply doesn't rise to the occasion of trying to figure out really how you operate in the city. How do you deal with the billionaire class? So I don't think there's actually anything beyond that to be said positively about Andrew Cuomo. I think he is Noah, as you've described. And it's kind of like it's a sort of a sore loser, kind of turning around again and showing up and going this should be easy for me. I used to be governor. And that's insulting to New Yorkers as well. So I would say, not Eric, not Andrew, sure, Zoran, or, Curtis Sliwa. I mean, his show is a good show. I don't really mean that, but I mean, I was going I missed the beret. Yeah. I missed the beret, and I wanted him to be wearing the beret on stage. But at least he has a kind of an honest show person's kind of demeanor. And, at the end of the day, I think the only real positive possibility is this young kid from, from Morningside Heights, who's, I say, give him the give him the lead. See
Well,
what happens.
When we have a president who has absolutely no idea what he's doing, I think some people are a little more willing to go with
Right.
this kind of lack of experience conversation. But Katie, before you got here, Harry and I were having a conversation. Sorry, without you. But
Please, just don't record it.
right, the issue was, I'm afraid, Rick, that people are just like, as we get closer to November 4th, it's like, Zoran's a little too young and inexperienced. I don't like Cuomo. Whatever, I'll just have fun with my vote and vote for Sliwa. And I find Sliwa to be highly problematic for a whole list of reasons that we have talked about on this podcast and we can get into some more. But like, how much, you're interviewing people all the time. Like, do you feel that some people are like leaning towards a Sliwa in the sense it's like, I'm a Democrat, but I'm a little nervous about these two, and like Sliwa's not going to win, so I'll vote for Sliwa.
Well, I think, and just one, because Harry brought up Cynthia Nixon, and it, in my brain, it reminded me, when she was running for governor, the main attack from the same Cuomo, we're going to call you 92 times in a row and monopolize all your time and talk at you for hours, people who are still working for Cuomo, they belittled her because she was an actress. And Cynthia Nixon, she was a child actress, which is incredibly difficult. I found it almost offensive, and I'm not an actress, but I thought, how many actors and just creative people are there in New York City, right? And you are completely belittling it. And we see that with Zoran Mamdani. He keeps saying he's never had a job. Ayanna Harry from New York One asked this week, isn't an assembly member a job? Well, he's not a very good assembly member. He was a foreclosure crisis counselor before that at a well-known nonprofit in Queens. So the belittling of someone who, to him, has never had a job. Even the cocktail napkin joke that they said, I mean, Curtis Sliwa, we could put your resume on a cocktail napkin. Guardian Angels, 75 to present. Radio host. Again, I find it to be, and even the age thing. It's funny with age, like 34, if you're a 35-year-old woman, you're geriatric and at the doctor, but if you're a 34-year-old man, you can't be.
You're a kid.
And what Mamdani said last night was, your problem is your experience, Cuomo. But what you're saying about Sliwa, again, and I've said this on the pod, being from a white ethnic neighborhood, right? Rockaway is Sliwa Town, Howard Beach is Sliwa Town, Staten Island, but parts of the Bronx. Even I was walking around Chinatown today, lots of Sliwa supporters. I think a lot of people don't find him to be problematic. They think he's a real deal New Yorker. He is a little bit more moderate, right? Even his response on the ICE raid on Canal Street, he wasn't rah-rah Trump, go get him, which you see some conservative council members saying that. He said they shouldn't go after these quality of life enforcements. There are people who are true Sliwa diehard loyalists. And I don't think people I've spoken to, I actually heard from a friend today who is on the more conservative side. He's like, I can't vote for Cuomo. Sliwa's a clown. Maybe I'll vote for Mamdani. And so I don't think he'd want his friends to know that, other friends, but there's this toss-up. But I find everyone's like, I can't believe these are the options we have in 8 million New Yorkers. But then you have really strong Mamdani supporters who see in him, there's a real star quality to him, which has a good and bad side to it. But people are really inspired and love him. And I think that's encouraged all this. And one final note, the Cuomo team and all the haters, for lack of a better word, the scavenger hunt he even did the soccer tournament on Sunday, and they're just so almost mean about it. And I'm like, so you're mad about a scavenger hunt in a beautiful summer Sunday,
Right.
where people traveled around New York City with their friends. Maybe they met people, maybe they met new people, maybe they found a love connection, maybe they got out and touched grass, which especially the Cuomo team says when you're being mean to them on Twitter, and they learn about New York City, and what's wrong with that? The whole get a job. Well, it's Sunday. Some people do work Monday through Friday. So it is, as Rick said, this really negative cynicism that I do think backfires.
Absolutely.
When, people are like, even what he said today on the Sid Rosenberg show, and Sid Rosenberg, who is a pretty historically despicable person on the radio, I saw someone said, you know what, like, I don't like Mamdani, but this is out of line.
Yeah. Well, it's a sad bridge too far, Cuomo. So, Harry, sorry, I've grabbed you while you're drinking. But, so let's talk about Cuomo. It seems like he's like grasping for air. I mean, we're literally seeing this man who's returned back to New York City because he hasn't been here in a very long time. Part of the Mamdani campaign seems to be joy. When I did that thing at the New York Times. We talked about that. But, like, you know, part of what some of the Mamdani supporters said the first round was that, like, he's awakened something in me. You know, he's reminded me that, like, politics isn't dead. For me, Mamdani has, like, a Jimmy Carter quality or a Joe Biden quality where it's like, listen, you just seem like a good person who wants to work for the good of the people, no matter who they are. And I know that there's some pockets and factions of folks who are like, no, he hates me. It's like, I don't really get that sense. That's just me, and I've been in politics a long time. But, like, let's talk about Andrew Cuomo. It seems as though it's slipping away from him, and he knows it. He feels it. I mean, he literally looks pained doing everything in these last few weeks. I mean, part of it is the entitlement. Part of it's just like, I can't believe I have to sit up here with this kid and, like, defend anything. I did think that bringing one of the accusers of Andrew Cuomo was a bold move. I always think that could go either way sometimes, where it feels like using women as a prop. And so, but I mean, he stood there back straight and was like, hey, she's in the audience. She can't speak. So here we are. But, like, talk to us a little bit about Cuomo and choosing to go on, like, the Logan Paul show and, like, trying to get this, like, right-wing bro vibe going in these last sort of desperate attempts.
So, two brief things.
Brave.
When you're a winner, you look smart and everything's behind you and it adds up one way or another. And Cuomo is now a loser. He had to resign as governor, and I just left for the good of the state. Okay, guy. And then he lost the Democratic primary and badly, and so he's staggering. Mamdani has this incredible wind at his back. He had the courage of his very long-standing conviction when it came to Israel, right? That a decade earlier, he's a college student and he's into BDS, and this is fundamentally an apartheid state. I think there's a lot wrong with that, but plainly events over the past 2 years, since October 7th, the alignment with the Trump administration and other things gave tons of coherence to that narrative, and it was much closer to where voters were at than, like, the party's leadership and its finance class. And, Cuomo joined Netanyahu's defense team. He passed a boycott for New York State, where if you were involved in BDS, you couldn't do business with the state through an executive order. I believe Hochul has continued to this point. So Mamdani looks very smart and appealing in the ways that a winner does. Interestingly, the ceasefire and, like, a good moment for Trump, he gets pressed on his Fox interview, came too late to have any impact in the race. So, look, Cuomo's the same guy he's always been, and the left's critique of him, and he's frustrating and horrible and a bully, and those are real things. They're not just ideological things, but it's all finally caught up. But the upshot of all that is he would be losing close in a two-way race. It's a three-way race. That makes it harder. He's losing by a lot. He had one shot to return to politics after this withdrawal, which is the second really humiliating withdrawal loss of his career after his first run for governor and divorce and a bunch of other stuff. So he looks pathetic, but he's basically the same guy he was when he looked dominant, and that's actually a very, I think, helpful reminder about how these things go. With Mamdani, really quick, it's inspiring to see him and the DSA, and I have great skepticisms to this point still about both, getting people who are not involved in our politics out and engaged and meeting each other, and getting people who, by the way, are sometimes there because they're frustrated and their ambitions, they have good college degrees, they don't, they grew up in the city, whatever, and, like, finding other people, finding purpose, like, oh, I have these talents and here's a way to apply them and actually participate in our politics. And you have this collapsed center, Eric Adams, Andrew Cuomo, like, are you kidding me? These are the best options you have to present right now? Adams, who's compromised by Trump, Cuomo, 13 women and who resigned and who was a bully and had all these things. And this is the best we can offer. So absolutely, people taking a chance, I understand. And bringing new people into our system is great. And to anyone who doesn't like what these people are bringing, like, organize, do things that are appealing, bring people out. And there's always talk about this, and at moments like that, there was after Tiffany Caban almost won in Queens, and then all these people forget. And then, they look up 6 years later, and Mamdani's about to be mayor, and they say, oh my God, again. By the way, the week that he was going to keep Tish, Jessica Tish, the police commissioner, which was a big nod to the grown-ups and eccentrics, and Patrick Gaspard, who I think we're going to have on the podcast right after the election, but is listed in every single story now as the man quietly advising Mamdani. My man, if you're in every story, it's not that quiet. But like, this is a big signal, and it's a funny and interesting one because Tish has definitely not said she would take that. Braden came on our podcast, who Tish had been in the NYPD under him and said she shouldn't. And plainly, there's like all these layers of negotiation going on. But Mamdani's clearly trying to suggest I'm not a crazy person, I'm not a radical, I want what's best for this city, and to send signals to the city at large and so forth about that.
The money class needs some adults, and they want some names, and they want some names before November 4th to feel comfortable. Rick, having looked at the wide span that is New York City, if you were to advise Mamdani, what mayors would you suggest he model himself after? He's sort of talked about mayors that he likes, but...
I think LaGuardia and oddly Bloomberg, who are the two greatest mayors in New York's history. Totally different men, totally different times, but who came up at moments of tremendous crisis. LaGuardia coming up, with the Depression already fully in place, and with this extraordinary and very unusual now kind of cohort of, a New Yorker in the White House, a New Yorker in City Hall, and this opportunity to do something sort of alone and in tandem with the President of the United States. It's totally unusual, not at all what the kind of moment we have right now is. But the result of that was his ability to, with enormous New Deal funds, which nobody's had before or since, to be able to make substantive change that we live in the city that LaGuardia created with the help of $7 billion in 1930s money from FDR, which is a lot of money in the 1930s. And Bloomberg, we tend to remember him because of the end. He went on for 12 years. But, when he got here, the city was in terrible crisis. It was already spiraling into a kind of recession before 9/11. 9/11 hits, a kind of, the post-traumatic syndrome, as you put it in this wonderful interview you did for us on our new episodes, is the PTSD from the 20th century was now compounded by the PTSD of 9/11. And there's this sense, as we all remember, but it kind of like moved into the past, that the city was going to go down the drain very rapidly. And here comes this guy who could not possibly have won without 9/11, who I didn't vote for. I'm a hippie from Ann Arbor. My grandmother would have just come and killed me for doing that. And yet I kind of secretly wanted to, and then did the next two times. And he comes in and he makes this, at a moment of crisis and even of tectonic change. New York in 2001 was not in the crime situation it had been up to 1990, 1993. But what it was is it had never figured out what kind of city it was going to be after we lost the port and the industry. That had not been changed, since the early 1960s. And so even though we made it through the worst of the dark times of the 20th century, we still didn't know what was going to happen at that point. And this mayor comes along, a billionaire mayor with a Boston accent. He comes into New York. He's a Red Sox fan. And it turns out that, as you said in an interview for me, as you get older, you shudder to think what would have happened if Mike Bloomberg had not been mayor of New York. I think that Zoran Mamdani is another person who's facing it's not only a moment of crisis, it's a moment of kind of a tectonic shift. We all feel it in our guts. We're not in Kansas anymore, to say metaphorically. We know that it's not just another election, that 2025 is not just another year in the history, even though we're talking with incredible people who have such a knowledge of how elections go. We're in a different time. And I think the appeal of Mamdani is, he's clearly genuine. I mean, he's ambitious, but we're all ambitious. He's genuine, and you can feel that. And he comes at a moment where things are breaking up and changing around us. And the people who came out and voted for him and caused us such surprise in the primary are representing a large cohort of Americans, of New Yorkers, who realize, you know what? Something's changing. It's not just it's time for another election, another odd year election in New York City. It is time of major change. And we can hear in this person that he is connected to that feeling we have that we live in a world of tectonic shift. And I think that that's why, a Cuomo, an Adams, certainly a Curtis Sliwa, in some sense doesn't have a chance. Because no matter who they are, Red Beret, old Cuomo name, famous from my time as, vote for Cuomo, not the homo. Mm-hmm. So I still carry that chip on my shoulder. I think that, and Adams, he's so experienced, goes back to the police force, kind of a reformer and a policeman at the same time, borough president. How much more experience can you have? But that would just be to say, we're going to continue with some version of status quo ante for a crowd of a constituency of people who go like, we're not in status quo ante. Mm-hmm. We don't know where we are. And so I think that that's why, I say this without embarrassment if I'm completely wrong, Mamdani's gonna win. Because he's the only person who, in 2025, absolutely represents the reality of where we are. Whether he's left, right, middle, I don't even think that matters. He knows the world we're living in. Mm-hmm. And he feels it, and he thinks he has something he can offer. And I think the main thing he has to offer is that connection to the reality of where we are, irrespective of his ideology.
Well, as we wind down, because we've got a whole room full of people who want to ask us questions, what we've been talking about quite a bit, Rick, on the podcast, is this idea of, say, affordability that Mamdani has put forward, where it's like it transcends race and ethnicity, Absolutely. It transcends borough, it transcends class in a lot of ways, because you've got people who make $40,000 and people who make $400,000 are feeling the squeeze. And Katie, to your point about this sense of community, I mean, this idea of like, let's play soccer together. So many New Yorkers, I think, are still, the other tectonic shift that Rick and I talked about post 9/11 was COVID, sort of pulling people away from their communities and sort of the traumatic stress that so many communities felt. So I guess I'm asking you, we'll talk on Monday, the 27th. Mm-hmm. It'll be the third day of early voting. But what should our listeners be thinking about as they kind of go into October 25th if they choose to take advantage of early voting?
Well, two things. And on Sunday, when Zoran had the soccer tournament, it was at, I guess, whatever Keyspan Park is called now, Maimonides Park, where the Cyclones play. And he made remarks and he said that there should be, and I'm paraphrasing, but there should be joy in a city with so much struggle and pain. And I think that's what really connects to people. Someone like Cuomo says, oh, you're the TikTok candidate. I mean, he actually has incredibly skilled filmmakers. So there's that. It's the design of it. Mm-hmm. It's not slop AI that Cuomo has been putting out and some of the worst TikTok videos I've ever seen in my life. But he's very good on camera and he has a great team behind him. But there's something else that the focus of people when they're voting, right? And I think a lot of people think it's always going to be public safety. But I think it is affordability because, like you said, even people who make more than the median income are feeling the squeeze. And last week...
also, you don't get public safety if you don't have affordability.
Yeah, and it's funny, Errol Lewis, the two of us spoke last week at the CUNY J school where I attended, and he's a professor. And he said, look, if you're lucky, especially with the crime numbers, if you get mugged, it's not discounting how traumatic it is or if you were a victim of crime. And obviously there's severe crime victims, but statistically it's rare. He's like, but when you were broke every single day. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, no, that's true. It's hard to crawl out of. It's hard to get out of. You never catch up. And it can happen in some cases overnight, something traumatic that could happen to you that sets you on a path. And to feel that in the city that you've lived in your whole life or however long you've lived here, to know that you can't catch up, to know that you can't save money, get better, all that kind of stuff, to see how things just get more and more expensive, even a 10-cent increase on the subway fare, it really hits people. So I think the appeal of someone who's presenting ideas, who knows how realistic they are in a 4-year term, but he's presenting options of things that could actually help them and maybe help the day-to-day in a way that's smart and fun. I think that's what voters are looking for. But I think if you're a voter looking to see, I think turnout's going to be big. I want to see what the turnout's like on Saturday and Sunday, and if it's huge numbers, I don't know what that could signal. I mean, it's funny, in the primary when the turnout numbers were high, I saw some Cuomo surrogates like, the turnout numbers are great for us. And it didn't turn out to be. But
And you're defining great as how, right?
they deleted some of those tweets, but I screenshotted them.
Right.
So-
Well, his campaign clearly likes to put things out and then try
Yeah.
and quickly delete. It's called the interwebs, guys. It's forever. Harry, what are you looking for in the next few days as people get ready for early voting?
I'm very interested in the early voting numbers and how those play out. I just want a PSA here, and maybe the people who are in on a thing like this don't need this, but like figure out where your early voting site is, look it up, and maybe different from your day of site. And while you're there, look at your sample ballot and take the whole thing in. There's 7 questions on the back that you get to answer. One of them is statewide, and not honestly
about the Adirondacks,
yeah,
right?
all that interesting to me as a parochial New York City.
Yeah.
But you know, the other 6 are actually really interesting. The one thing I will say, not with my editor in a nonprofit newsroom hat on, but with my columnist opinion hat on, is that shifting our elections to even years is crazy. It's an unbelievably stupid idea for a bunch of reasons, but just starting with, right now, when, let's say, Zohran Mamdani wins, he has 1 year to go to Albany, and they're all running for election and be like, I have a mandate, what's up? And we are a huge part of the state, but the state has all the power. As Governor Cuomo, presently, you know, running to be mayor, frequently like to remark. And if we shift there, that all goes away. It would be, I think, a really unhealthy thing. Also, the depressed don't bother knocking on doors or doing the stuff and then are mad at the DSA people who are. Democrats love it because election goes up, because everyone is voting, you know, in the big and nationalized contests, and it means that there is less focus here. I think it's a really terrible idea. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, when we were at, Harry's a current Moynihan Public Scholar at City College,
Following
CUNY.
in Christina Greer's footsteps.
We run this city. But we were asked this question by Mike Miller, who's a friend and colleague of ours. And the way Harry and I jumped out of our seats before he could finish the question, he's like, I don't really think it's a bad idea. And Harry and I, it's the dumbest thing we've ever heard. I mean, we went insane. So, yeah, I think, well, depending on how the question's worded, I would say vote no. But, you know, with these New York propositions, it's like, do you not want
Right.
to never have, you know, elections on the same year as presidentials? So, Rick.
Yes.
I'm super excited that you're here. I'm so thankful.
excited to be here.
You know, it's like, for those of you at home, we've got some people fanning out that Ric Burns is here, little swoons. Close us out. So, what are you looking for? I mean, I would say, here's my Mount Rushmore of people who know New York. Errol Lewis, Katie Honan, Brian Lair,
No, do
Big
not.
time.
and Ric Burns. Like, seriously.
Wow.
Seriously. You're on my Mount
I have a
Rushmore.
very large head. That's a lot.
Right.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Shipping away.
And Harry might be my backup. So you've thought about New York. You care deeply about New York. What should we leave our listeners with as they go into early voting in the next few days?
You know, New York, highly flawed, imperfect place, you know, has for literally hundreds of years, you know, at least partly represented what it was going to be like and what it now is like to live in a global culture where people from all over come together. And that's both an obvious thing to say about New York, but a crucial thing to say. And that in some sense, New York is not different from most cities in that respect. It's just more so. It's just more people, you know, over 200 languages spoken in the public school system. You know, 800 languages in the city. I mean, I didn't even know there was like 800 languages in the universe. And, you know, the values that are associated with diversity and multiculturality, all the things that go, you know, with globalization, both good things and difficult things, and maybe things we don't all agree with. They are embodied here and represented here. Not since the 1920s have those values been under attack and under siege. So this election is not only about New York City, it's about a kind of a national, and I would say even international contest going on between groups of people who believe, warts and all, that diversity, multiculturality, and globalization is the inevitable way for the future and also has values that we believe in. And a massive rise in a cohort that doesn't believe that at all. So this is a contest not just taking place inside the 300 plus square miles of New York City, in our borders. It is a local, civic, regional, national, and I would dare say international situation that we're in. So when you go and vote, early, late, or often, keep in mind that it's not simply the fate of New York City that's on the line right now. It is a fate that's much wider than that. And I believe that, everything I've ever been fortunate enough or accidentally learned about New York City or American culture broadly makes me feel that really, really strongly. We're at a crucial, crucial moment. And so vote for the person who seems best able to represent and care for the very values that make you want to be a citizen of New York, continue to live here, as I say, with all the pluses and minuses, because they are under siege. And, it's like we need to stand up for that, irrespective of whether or not Republican, Democrat, DSA, Red Beret. I mean, it really is a moment of crisis, and I think that New York needs to stand up and make its voice be heralded.
Well, a few things. One, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, please, thank you for having me.
Two, thank you to the Tenement Museum for hosting us. Thank you to our live studio audience for joining us. Thank you to my fantastic podcast co-host. I guess, can you promise us that you'll come back and just have a long podcast episode so we can walk through each episode?
Absolutely.
We'll just walk through each episode. Oh, we can have a live watch party for the next.
I hear a crowd of people running for the door.
Right. It'll be 24 hours with Ric Burns.
You know what? That's what they all say.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I'm Christina Greer here with Harry Siegel, Katie Honan, Ric Burns, and I want to thank Annie Polland and the entire Tenement Museum staff for a fantastic evening. You've been listening to FAQ NYC. We'll do our outros. I still don't have our outros memorized. PNT Knitwear, Jamie Rubin, shout out.
New York is podcast.
That's right.
Yeah.
Boom. Whoa. That's that.